I come to this location.
You gotta get something with access.
What's the new job?
I'm saying, I was just texting Abigail, trying to come over here for this, and I was like, I was being on campus.
I just seen email saying they're
How
running.
long it takes to walk from Melville to Mohler, because she's, I thought it was in Melville or something. I was like, oh my God. I gotta run across.
I keep on thinking like, is he locked out? And like, he's
It's-
VPAA.
Yeah.
I put a thing.
Yeah, I unlocked it and then saw it.
Yeah, well, it's,
Are you going every year when you go in? Okay, I don't think that's the same year. They don't look at it.
I'll let everyone get their seats.
All right, everyone, it is 6, so we'll go ahead and get started. Now, I know some people will be coming and going over the course of the evening, so if you could just wait until we're between speakers to do that, I would appreciate that. If you do have to leave in the middle of a presentation for any given reason, if you would essentially just prevent the door from slamming closed. These are very loud doors, as anyone who's taught or had a class in here knows. So if you essentially just guide the door closed behind you, that will make it a lot quieter. And then of course I feel the obligatory request to make sure you silence cell phones and any devices that you may need to. So please, I'd like to welcome everyone to this senior thesis presentations for the history and automotive history majors for this year. We're really proud of all the work that all these students have done, and I've just been honored to work with all of them. I know that all the support that you have all provided over the years has really allowed them to flourish. And you're going to have a wide variety of topics tonight, so some close to home and some quite far away. So our order of presentation this evening, Brandon Clifford with Restoring Liberal Arts, a History of McPherson College Auto Restoration. Abigail Coe, Under the Hood, Female Students in McPherson College's Automotive Restoration Program. Cash Nab, Preserving History of the Stanley Steam Car. Breanna Morck, The Boxer Rebellion, The Change in Missionary Work. And Canon Cavanaugh, How a Changing Sport Can Affect Subculture, an exploration of the UK's casual and ultra movements. So we have Brandon starting us off, so whenever you would like, and feel free to make yourself comfortable, move things around as you need.
Did you turn the brightness back down?
Oh, yeah, you know, right, I did not, so I will fix that. I even put a note in my phone and then I got busy printing stuff, so, here we go. All right, so, bear with me, I manage some technical issues, maybe that allow our, any latecomers to get here. Thank you for reminding us. Everyone's
trying earlier.
Everyone's slides have been so washed out. So let's fix this. Oops. I'm trying to do this without being busy. I might do that. Oops. Back to normal. Let me know when you like it. You're like, no, I don't.
It's never gonna look good on.
Well, that's true, we're dealing with the limits of the technology, so. All right, that should be. Alrighty, I'm gonna shut this door though.
All right, everyone, welcome. I'm Brandon Clifford. I'm a senior, I'm a history major and auto restoration history major. I've been working on this project for almost 2 years now with the help of Luke and Carrie. So welcome to McPherson College, 212. Some things haven't changed, but you know. So this is Restoring Liberal Arts, History of McPherson College Automotive Restoration. So my big question was, how did the auto restoration program become what it is today? So how did we get here question, and so I was really fascinated with changes in programming, how administrators and faculty dealt with enrollment problems, and changing interests in higher ed. And so that's really what kind of led this investigation. So my thesis is the auto restoration program first had to prove its economic viability before it could be redeveloped into Bachelor's of Science. So I focused mainly in my thesis about the transition to the Bachelor of Arts, or Bachelor of Science, sorry, from the 2-year degree. So that is the meat of my thesis, although I do try and cover the whole thing. So here we go, we'll start before auto restoration. So originally McPherson College was called McPherson College and Industrial Institute. So from 1887 to 1889, that was the official name, although there weren't any sort of industrious programming in the catalog up until 1913 when the agriculture department was added, and then 1970 when the industrial arts department was added. And then since we're adding engineering again, I thought I'd mention that engineering was offered from 39 to 51, chemical, mechanical, several types. But so auto mechanics was added to the industrial arts department in 59. But before that, mechanics classes were offered to the agriculture department. So essentially, as soon as they created the agriculture department, there was what was called farm shop, and that was essentially all your mechanics classes. The industrial arts stayed primarily just drafting and drawing early on, and then added other, vocational items that you'd expect. I do have a piece of trivia I want to see if anyone can guess. Of the current classes offered in the auto restoration department, which one of them has been on the catalog the longest?
Woodworking? No?
Close, advanced woodworking. Has been on the catalog since 1918, so consistently. So when the auto mechanics was added, that was essentially the class that was there when, hold on, Smoky Blue came in, we'll get there. This, however, I want to talk about is enrollment data for the college to up to 75. So as I talked about with Bruce in his interview, and as well as with several other people, this is Vietnam here, obviously. And then also, in the broader sense of higher ed, we have the Carnegie Commission comes in here as well, and they're like, higher ed's dead, and the, sort of like the bottom falls out of the market essentially. And then this is sort of like, this is McPherson College struggling to keep enrollment, and then we have Max 77 campaign, which is a big campaign to raise money, and that is part of what the Smoky Blue donation was, except not officially, but he trusted 1.5 million to the Industrial Arts Department, and then about 230 some K worth in antique vehicles are also donated as well. Several of those go to auction through and are advertised at Hershey, for example. That is an early part of the program's income. Department Chair Williams also helps develop this 2-year program with President Snell. Snell's generally regarded as one of the visionaries to push this along, because, I mean, what is the college going to do with all these cars? So that's 75, and so there's President Snell at the announcement. This is also the same announcement where Smoky Blue started to strip naked in front of the audience, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, I keep moving here. So, fall '76, the auto restoration course is officially offered in full. Cars restored and classes taught at the sheds in what's now B building. And that shed was leased from Smoky, and then the construction of Templeton's also completed. That was through a separate donation. And that housed the industrial art. So, and then here's albums, and then this is from one of the alumni bulletins, a selection of photos from the dedication. This is within, yeah, September '76. So yeah, was it completed? So the March, sorry, '77 that the dedication was happening. See Smoky there. That's the only like photo I had, but and so this is also from about '76, '77. This is one of Smoky's cars. You see restoration technology on the side. And so this was interesting. I found this in the archive. This was one of the flyers they handed out early on. And you can see offers 1 year, 2 year, and 4 year with the industrial arts teaching or business as options. But attached to this in the archive was an internal memo that said, "Do not advertise 1 year degree. You can't afford it." So in about 1980, they revised the curriculum to go from what was then similar to how it is now, lecture time and then lab time in like 3-4 hour blocks to like 9 hour blocks of lab, which is how it was when Luke was a student, much later. But that was partly the responsibility of Wayne Metzger. When he joined as a student, they hired him to help run the program. And he also set up the finances to start balancing the sheets, because as what he had told me, there had not been any bookkeeping on any of the cars for the first 4 years or so. So there was nothing had been kept track of. And then they recruited Pop Rice to help lecture. He was an automobile restorer from rural Tennessee, and he was a big staple of the program in the early years, establishing what it would be. And so then I have some photos of students. I don't know if you recognize him, but this is from the Centennial. Yeah, him too. I don't know if you know him, but anyway, so some of the work they're doing, and some of the events that are happening early on. And so after about 1980 or so, there's just falling enrollment. The budget's not getting any bigger. They're just pretty much living off the Blue Trust, especially in the 90s. And then, so things sort of just soldier on. And the program is still pretty divided from campus. Also, the interest in the industrial arts program itself is also dwindling. So they're trying to deal with both problems kind of converging at once. There's someone in this photo as well. And then prank call, so we canceled the program. That was in 1987. And they were literally in the meeting to cancel the program. And Jay Leno called, and Marilyn Lente, which was one of the administrative secretaries, answered. And she's like, "No, this can't be Jay Leno." And he's like talking about the cars. And she's like, "Oh, I read something somewhere that he's into cars." And so she like convinced the other secretary, "We got to pass this through to the president. Like, it's urgent." And so like they stopped in their tracks right there, and then they reconsider. And so then I found there's a whole bunch of documents. They created a task force to properly evaluate the program and see what needs done. And at the same time, Jay Leno publicizes the auto restoration at an award ceremony. One of the McGuire's Auto Enthusiast of the Year, I believe it was, and Bob Kneckel and student Dave Liepelt were invited to go along with him. And so they were there for that, and that was the first big piece of publicity. Another thing I didn't put on here was that My Classic Car came in 1998 and filmed, and they did a feature. It ran, I think, 6 or 8 times through 1998. So that was another big piece of publicity. And then Bob Bethel, who was a senator, was the editor for like the newsletter for the Veteran Motor Car Club of America. And he had been calling the school, and he's like, I want to get a tour of this program, and no one had been answering. And finally got a hold of Bob Kneckle. He's like, I almost wrote that this place was a scam. I need to come see this place. And so and then he got involved with the program, and he started getting industry connections for the program. That's also how we found Robert Vaughn, who was one of the directors, and did a lot of, as Luke said, barnstorming to get us out there. And then also the creation of the National Advisory Board. So a committee who basically comes to us and says, hey, this is what we need in the industry. So I feel like I'm talking fast, but and then so President Dill tells the technology department faculty that the program will be increasing its freshman enrollment to 32 for 1999, and they're like, hell no, we're out, and just like walk right there. And so they're like, okay, we need to hire whole new faculty. So then it's just kind of like, or we're gonna figure this out as we go sort of mentality, and then there's this whole like, okay, we got to figure out this program sucks. It's like, and so that's also someone you know. So they decide, okay, this isn't working. Like, we have support financially, like there's interest in the program, but we've got to do something. It doesn't integrate into our mission, and also there was a financial gain to be had that if you make it a bachelor's of science, then you spread the load out onto the other faculty, and then you double also your tuition income because students are just staying twice as long. And then one thing Bob Kneckle told me is that when he was invited to the Detroit Auto Show in 2003, and they pulled the giant $100,000 check out of the trunk of a Maybach, and we're like, here you go. That one of the stipulations was that they make it a bachelor's of science. I have not been able to confirm or deny that, so interesting thought. And so then the different emphases were created within the major. Luke says that's partly like modeled off of his interdisciplinary, but also there was also Dave Leapelt who did something similar. And then also car show becomes a staple of the program at this time, although there was an earlier one in '84 that the old timers will argue about. But so that's that. And then we have the modern era, and most of you are familiar with that. So we have strategic planning, Path to Pebble. We have, I mean, the program becomes a focal point of the college. Still has a high operating expense, but is not sinking money like it was for most of its life. I think Steve Gustafson told me it had lost $5 million at one point out of the school's own budget, so it was not great. But there's been consistent growth since, and continuous development interest externally. And so, yeah, there you go. Any questions? I had, how did I do on time? Oh, I went over? Crap. No, actually, wait, I'm right on time.
You're
I did
fine.
perfect. I had not rehearsed that. Yes.
Could you find how Jay Leno found the program?
So it's sort of a, like, Randy Ema and Garrett Green had a Randy Ema connection. Randy Ema is another big car guy in California. And so he knew about it through that, and also, like, car people just know each other. Like, it's hard to explain.
Yeah,
But,
just kind of networks.
yeah, it's just a small world, as anyone knows. But, yeah. So, anyone else? Yes, Christy.
Two things. Could you tell us a little bit about how you conducted this research?
Oh, yes.
And then second, how important were the archives? This research?
You are going to have to keep this contained.
All right.
Like just 3 minutes.
I will try and give you the abridged version as best I can. So this started out, it was just going to be an oral history. I was just going to interview people. And then that ballooned into something else. I helped Luke and his was it chassis class, drug over I think 7 or 8 filing cabinets
9.
full, packed to the brim full of documents that had not been looked at since the 90s. So I started sorting through those. I found so much stuff that I was like, I'd love to use this. I don't have time to look at it. Not only that, I also read every single Spectator from 75 to present, and every single course catalog from 1888 to 2005, including some later. So yeah, that is pretty much the bulk of my research. So many primary documents, I can't even, yeah, it's like 200 of them if I had to guess, but anyway. Yeah, so, yes.
So in all those primary documents, was there ever a class they tried for a year or two that you,
Oh, yes.
that you just think is really cool that we should, you
Oh,
know,
that's really
share?
cool. They used to have basket weaving in the industrial arts department.
Was
That
it
was
for water?
a long, they had that for a really long time, actually. I think we should bring basket weaving back. And then I forgot to mention also in the modern era, they had the motorcycle degree that they tried that flopped as well. So yeah. Any others? All right.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you. Sorry, let me find yours. Is that, I think that's yours, yeah, the light green. I don't know. Oh, okay.
You can go ahead and sign us. You can sign me out or sign.
I think if I just sign in.
Okay.
I don't know why it logged me out.
Because of the technology, you can disagree with you and will.
Okay. Okay. Where?
Brandon, did you steal the clicker? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Now it's.
Sorry.
Okay, so I am Abigail. I am also a senior in the automotive program. This is under the hood, female students in McPherson College's automotive restoration program. Okay, so shout out again to Christy and our archives because my coverage was kind of inspired by that. You know, looking through that, being down there every week, I saw a lot of photos that I'd never seen before, with people I'd never seen before, articles, you know, just all sorts of things with women in the automotive program who I had no idea who they were. And, you know, I really just was wondering, like, what was their experience like? You know, was it different from mine? Was it better? Was it worse? Just how was it different? And it kind of prompted my research question, you know, what has the experience of women been like? And how has it changed? And through a series of biographical interviews, I kind of determined that as the program has developed, female students' experiences have declined. So I'm gonna skip my history of the AR program because Brandon gave us a really lovely one and I don't want to embarrass myself. But the most important part of all of this is that the first female student in the program graduated in '95. So my methodology had biographical interviews with 9 women. They were recruited through a Facebook post on the McPherson College Automotive Restoration alumni page, so thank you to Luke for letting me join that. And through personal communication, I reached out to 11 women, and from that 6 were willing and able to do an interview with me. There were some requirements. You had to identify as a female during your time here, you had to have graduated from the program, you couldn't have dropped out, and it had to be from spring 2024 or before, just so that, you know, they had time to kind of reflect on their experiences. It wasn't like you graduated last semester and everything is fresh in your mind, you can think on stuff, and to kind of minimize any conflict of interest with me, if any problems, I don't know. But with 9 women, that is a really small sample size. That kind of meant that my study resisted a lot of meaningful statistical analysis, and all of these interviews need to be understood as case studies. It also means that this is an incomplete history. I did not interview every woman that attended this program. And as I stated, the first woman in the program was in the 90s. The first woman that I interviewed started in 2005. Also really important to note that intersectionality plays a huge role in this. Not every woman that I interviewed is straight, not every woman that I interviewed is white. The focus of this study though is on gender, so I didn't ask any specific questions on how intersectionality played into their experience here. Some did mention it. Okay, so with my interviews, 3 groups appeared. 2009, which I interviewed 2 women, 2019, where I interviewed 3, and then graduates of 2022 and 2024, which is everyone else. So, 2009, I interviewed Casey Smith, who started in 2005, and Tabitha Cantor, who started in 2006. During my interviews with these women, they both spoke mostly positively about their experiences here. They had no issues with the professors treating them any differently. They received the same career opportunities. You know, everything was equal on that front. On the student front, you know, interactions with students, Casey said that she never felt out of place and commended her male counterparts for that. Tabitha felt that as a whole, she was treated equally, but had a problem with one specific student. But he was the only one who ever made her feel like a girl in a guy's world, to use her terms. I'd like to say that this is the only problem that was mentioned from my 2009 graduates. Everything else was positive. Everything was going smooth at this point. So, jump forward to 2019. I interviewed Julia Berger, Bella Zacchia, and Abigail Morgan. Abigail has some really interesting additional insight because she was hired on as faculty after graduation, so she really got to understand a lot about the program and the women in it after she graduated. It's also important to mention that 2019 was the first and only year that no portfolios were needed to be accepted into the program. It was the largest class of AI students so far, as what I was told, and more women were accepted into the program that year than ever before. There were some connections between my 2009 group and the 2019 group. They felt the same in terms of relationships with professors. They never felt singled out. They never felt demeaned. They received the same exact education. On the student front, Bella and Julia both had really good experiences regarding the other students and didn't feel like anyone gave them any problems. Abigail said that she made some really good lasting friendships and relationships, but she did notice a lot of bullying and negativity, which was not exclusively towards the women, but it was pretty prevalent. She responded to that by trying to kind of prove herself, and she said that she was trying to win this competition that does not need to be a competition. So that, to me, says that, you know, this bullying across all students, it's more of a systematic problem than just, you know, one person giving Tabitha a problem. There were also things that Abigail experienced that she did not report due to fear of being labeled a snitch or weak or a rat. She said that she was not as much worried about professor reactions or school reactions, but just the students. And like I said a second ago, the extent of these problems showed it's more of a systematic problem at this point, not just a few bad eggs. It's a dozen bad eggs. So to me, the issues that Abigail brought up are at the beginning of a specific shift that is more integral to the experience of female students. There are lasting impacts of this as well. She mentioned a lot that, you know, she did interviews, or not interviews, she did tours with women who would come in, you know, before their freshman year, they had this light in their eyes, they were exactly where they were supposed to be, and by the time they graduated, the light was gone. And systematic issues at this point. To the 2022-2024 group, 2 of the women that I interviewed in this group chose to remain anonymous. The other 2 were Mercedes Thompson and Lindsay Archer. Anonymous A, yes, she was the only one who didn't mention, you know, really larger problems. She had no problems with the professors, which is a common theme across all of my interviewees. She said that maybe some of the students that she interacted with doubted her at first, but by the end of her time here, they ended up respecting her. She felt that the program and the school as a whole did a really good job supporting her. Anonymous B is kind of the flip side of that. She brought up a whole bunch of problems that she had. Once again, not really anything specific to the professors. The biggest thing she said was that, she felt like some of the professors maybe couldn't be as, chummy or close with the female students, but not necessarily out of a dislike for any of them. More just as like an abundance of caution. They didn't want to say the wrong thing. They didn't want to, unintentionally offend anyone or make them uncomfortable. That being said, on the student side, she often felt left out. She told me that there were plenty of experiences where she knew she wasn't a part of the group chat. And she felt like being a woman made it a lot harder for her to make friends, which really contributed to her time here. She did not have much positive to say. She ended her interview with saying that she felt more like a marketing tool as a woman than an actual student. Back to Mercedes and Lindsay. Mercedes told me she didn't have any issues with any of the other students treating her differently, but Lindsay talked a lot about how she was bullied consistently during her time here. She said that it was made clear to her that she didn't belong, she was viewed as an attention seeker, that the only reason she was successful in this program was because she was sleeping with the professors. Comments were made about her sexuality, about her weight, all sorts of things. And she was only kept in contact with one friend through this school. Mercedes, going back, sorry, switching up a little bit, she mentioned that the school kind of had its golden students within the program. Specific women in the program were given more opportunities than others, and she was not on the receiving end of that, and felt like somewhat intentional. They had their people that they liked, and everyone else was pushed to the side. She also brought up problems with the different emphases, not related necessarily to the women, but if you're a tech emphasis, you have a lot more opportunities than any of the other emphases. And there were also, within these 4 interviews in this group, problems that other women experienced were brought up, so there was an awareness of the female students that this was a larger problem. It wasn't just within themselves. And within this group there was the most negativity, which kind of supports this theory of started out great, and as the program has developed and gotten bigger within Pebble Beach and all this publicity, the experience has gone down. For everything that it's worth, women have always worked on cars. The first guidebook to working on cars written by a woman was published in 1906, which is 2 years before the first Model T hit the streets. In 1916, the Girl Scouts had an automobiling badge, which is this. If I am ever in an antique store and I find it, I will be purchasing it. This was for proficiency working in cars, and they kept that up until I think around the 70s, when it transformed more into just appreciation of general technology. In 1971, Chrysler initiated their Women on Wheels program, where they taught women how to work on their own cars and published handbooks and everything. However, in recent years, women in the industry has gone down. This is a chart from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Starts at 2010 and ends in 2024. You can see, right here, this is the 2023-ish mark. And all 3 of these also are women in various automotive fields. Some of it is auto body, service, and then just general repair. You reach a mark which coincides with when women in the program are having more problems, where women in the field goes down. There also is a study done by Deloitte. They had a whole big survey thing about the positive changes in the automotive industry's attitude towards women throughout the past 5 years. The study was done in 2020. In 2015, women said that within the industry, 64% of women, noted a significant or positive change. In 2020, only 39% of that agreed. Male respondents said 64% that it had gotten better. For about the same, 2015 was 21%, and in 2020 it was 26%, with male respondents saying 23%. So kind of still increase on the women's side, but they didn't give me any feedback for if the male respondents had gone up or down. And then for a little change or gotten worse, in 2015, 15% of women thought that it had gotten worse. In 2020, 35% thought that it had, and the male respondents said 13. So there's an increase in a percentage of women saying that the industry is getting worse or stagnating, and men think that it's getting better. Also in this study, they asked women, you know, if you had to change your career today, would you stay in the automotive field? 55% of women said that they would switch careers. So where do we go from here? There is an excellent source driving gender equality in the automotive industry, where they present 5 educational strategies that educators obviously can implement. Promoting STEM for young girls and women, development of inclusive criteria, making sure all the curriculum highlights women's work, promotes female role models, even just something as simple as having women working on cars in the PowerPoints. Mentoring, so connecting women with female professionals, and then practical experiences like internships and research projects, which McPherson is really good about, and then just an awareness of gender biases. It's like education on stereotypes, promoting respect and tolerance, stuff like that. I'd like to end with, I asked all of my interviewees what they thought could be done to improve the program and the industry in general. Most kind of focused on what I consider to be a protection and accountability aspect. Some were internal, like things that us women can do ourselves, and some were external, like how we would like to be treated, how our environment can treat us. So internal, calling out behavior and teaching people how you want to be treated, being selective with who you surround yourself with, which includes men as well. If someone is horrible and you don't want to be around them, don't be around them. Show that you take it seriously and let your work speak for itself, and understanding that we all have really different thresholds of what we can tolerate, and supporting other women through what they find acceptable and not acceptable. External, we need more resources for sexual harassment. We need more women in the field, so just kind of allowing women a place at the table in general. Drawing harder lines on what is acceptable and what isn't, and making sure that those problems are actually addressed instead of just letting them fall to the wayside when a student graduates. Support the women that are here, which goes for employers as well. You can always have another customer, you can't always have another skilled worker. And then just more female representation on a personal level, so female professors, female faculty, female roles that male students have to respect. That will teach them to, understand these differences and stuff. And then there were a few that kind of did not fit in with this internal and external, and I thought were really important. Make the fact that women are in the industry, make that secondary. We don't say the best male coach builder, the best male panel leader, the best male mechanic, whatever. Why do we do it for women? Why is it, oh, she's the best female race driver ever, just she's a great driver. It doesn't need to be a thing. And then continue to give women the opportunity in the first place. Accept them, hire them, teach them, they want to learn. We had 5 girls drop out of the program this past semester. It might not be great right now, but we can make changes to make it better. And then there's a few of my sources. Any questions, actually? Please don't clap. Did you want to ask something, Drake? You texted me.
I do want to ask something. So I noticed that you mentioned that the 5 women have dropped out this semester alone, and especially following the trends that you say have kind of been emerging, perhaps with the few interviewees you've had. How do you think interviewing dropouts, in addition to graduates, would influence or even affect interviews?
Going based off of what I know about the women who dropped out here, just in my time here, I think that it would have trended a lot more negatively. They didn't stay, there's a reason why. I wasn't able to track them down, so I don't know what the real reason is, but I have a feeling it would make the
So, you had something?
Well, I did, yeah, but you first.
I guess it's not so much a question, so don't be nervous.
Okay.
No, I think, I'm glad to hear that over time, hopefully everyone in the program has been treated equally by, or the way faculty have treated women in the program has not deteriorated. I'm glad to hear that. I would say all of us faculty, we've especially this year, the past 2 years, we've talked about it a lot. We need to be equipped with how to help. And that's a tough thing because we're all guys on the faculty. And so I don't know, think about that. Maybe we can talk about what we can do to make everybody in the program feel more welcome, I mean, we're kind of stuck with what's in our control, which is the laws of Templeton, but
A lot
I
of
don't
things
know,
carry
I'd like
over
to
from
talk more
campus.
about, think about what we can do.
Yeah, I can send you this article. I would love to talk more if that's something you'd like to.
So see, one question, just,
I had a methodology question, I guess. So I was really impressed with your methodology and you broke down the statistics, who you interviewed, and used that to drive your thesis. I mean, that's a really great technique and really, really impressive, I thought. You had to ask a lot of sensitive questions, and I think as a historian, the nice thing about primary documents is they don't talk back. So I'm wondering, how did you prepare to ask those kinds of questions? How did you develop those questions, and what was the overall experience of that?
So I think I had 10, 11 questions-ish. I kind of started off every interview with I'm going through this program. I know that not everything is great, but there is a lot of good. Please don't feel like you need to spin the narrative one way or another, but also you can be honest with me. I mostly just I let people say what they felt they needed to say. There was a lot of did you notice that you were ever treated differently? Did you ever feel that you were treated differently? But just, I tried really hard not to force a narrative. That was something I was really worried about. I didn't want to go into it being oh, well, I'm a woman in this program. I know what it's like. Did you have bad experiences? I really tried to avoid any of that. And I feel like people were pretty open to saying I had these really amazing experiences, but I also had these not so great ones too.
May we clap very softly for you?
I guess.
Okay.
It's okay. It's all right.
All right. So I'm Cavanaugh, also a senior in the Automotive Restoration Program with an emphasis and a minor in history. So I spent a lot of time carrying those throughout these past 4 years and this classroom. So what I did when we kind of started last semester is when I did most of my work. We all kind of sat individually but combined our meetings and talked about really what do I want to go over. Through 4 years I've done a bunch of different topics, historiography and everything else. And we all kind of came to the consensus of what's going to help me out in the future. And so that's steam cars, because a little background, when I was a freshman here, my boss approached the college, the program, and said I need 2 or 3 students who are interested in early cars, pre-1916, mainly steam. And Brian Martin reached out to me. I knew nothing about steam cars, and I was like, why would someone own one of those? And here we are, 4 years later. I'm moving there in about 3 weeks to take on the position of shop manager, working on steam cars. So here we are, and this was quite a fun project for me. I love the history of the cars more than really the cars themselves. So being able to go through major archives from east to west coast really just kind of gave me a big thrill. So here it is, preserving history of the Stanley steam car. So my research question thesis was what made the Stanley Motor Carriage Company innovative and historic enough to make their history worth preserving years after closing. You can kind of go a lot of ways with this, but I kind of want to make sure, like, you know, so many car companies throughout the past years have closed down. Why is this one we should put our resources into? So it's not just about the company, but forgotten technological patents. So brief context, Stanley started in 1897, no, in 1897, they put the first car out, the brothers did. Twin brothers, F.E. and F.O., born in Maine. They were bored, kind of like everyone else in the early days. They just kind of wanted to get on wheels. So at first, they had a patented dry plate photography company, and that's kind of where they got their first big jump of money, to where they're like, okay, we can do something with this. And so, like I said, they went into cars. First steam carriage, 1887, was very simple and reliable. It only had 15 moving parts on it. It looked just kind of like a box on 4 wheels, like everything else did back in those days. And then they didn't plan on selling cars till late 1890s. And so they just kind of built 1 or 2 here and there. Finally, someone was like, they debuted it at a fair, and someone goes, you need to sell this car to the public. It's a huge winning thing. And so they went around, got all the patents for it, and started selling everything. For about 5 years, they sold cars to the public under the Stanley Brothers name, and then they sold the company to Mobile. By that point, they wanted nothing to do with it, gained a lot of money from it. About 5 years later, they got jealous of the Mobile company and bought it back. And so then that's when it really is the second Stanley Steam Motor Carriage Company. So the next big innovation was steam condensers in 1915, which improved the whole car as a general, improved the range of about 20 to 30 miles of water use to they could go about 150 miles on one. So that was a big jump for the whole car. So my biggest thing is a lot of people don't know is you take a steam car to a show, they're surprised that it runs on steam. Because all we really know nowadays is gas. It's all you see at really most shows. So I wanted to prove the gasoline dominance was not inevitable. Steam power dominated early markets because, as you guys could think, a lot of factories, boats, trains all ran off of steam. Why couldn't cars? So they could get high speeds, smooth operation, and simplicity. The steam cars, like I said, everyone, there's steam mechanics on almost every single block. So smooth operation, they didn't have clunky transmissions that you had to shift. Everything was just one throttle. That's all you did, one motion. Very simple. Like I said, the early car was 15 moving parts. On these later cars, there's obviously more than that, but they didn't have to mess with carburetors and have to mess with other mechanical gear components all around the whole car. So very efficient and practical. Various fuels, if you were on the East Coast or if you're out here in the West, you can run it off of kerosene, gasoline, really anything that you could put in that burn. Some people probably put tequila in it, you know, if they're bored. And considerably, they called it a very safe car because it's external combustion opposed to internal combustion as gasoline is. So, preserving the history of this company not only honors the ingenuity of its founders, but also contributes to a more comprehensive and understanding of technological and entrepreneurial developments that shape modern transportation. So, as I kind of jump ahead, eventual downfall, this car company did not stay around. So the key factors was, with gas cars, you could just turn the key. The steam car, if you're doing it well, about 45 minutes. If you're in a hurry, hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. Mass production on gas cars was a lot simpler. People could go down the assembly line as Henry Ford did with the Model T, where all the steam cars to the very end were hand built, hand done, hand fit every component. And as you can imagine, with that, the cost was very, very high. So the brothers, one thing that I didn't know until I started doing this, they did not want to advertise any of their cars because they believed that if they built a good enough product, it would advertise itself. And why would they pay the money to put it out in the public? So with high costs, not a whole lot of cars sold, and then, like I said, company challenges, resistant to change, kind of like Henry Ford was with the Model T. They wanted to stay with one component for a lot of years, and then limited advertising. So, why? Why should we care? This is the big question that Carrie and I fought a lot through the semester. Why? I mean, honestly, just throw it away. So, historical significance, technological innovation, alternative path, and record-setting performance. So I'll start from the bottom and go up. Stanley's, from the start, like I said, they're very powerful with their steam, very smooth. They set speed records almost every other year or every 3 years with their cars. The last one they set was in the 20s, and it held, I think, till about the 90s. And that was over 200 mile an hour at a beach in Florida. So pretty impressive for a car that old to be setting records like that. The biggest thing, like I talked about, was an alternative path. Gasoline was not inevitable. You know, here, I mean, cars in the early days were ran off electricity, steam, and gas. Any one of them could have outwon the whole race, but gas is how we have it now. In technological innovation, these brothers were very geniuses. They could do anything they wanted to, and throughout the years, they held, I think it was over 5,000 patents, just the two of them, because anything they wanted to add onto the car, they would, and they're pretty smart about it. So history is not just about the winners. So in today's world, antique cars are typically looked at as a luxury hobby, but diving deeper, these cars could have stood up the test of time and should be looked at more as a piece of surviving history, which is my big why. So preservation importance. Stanley motor carriages should be seen as a teaching tool for historical and technological purposes, represent lost automotive paths, as I talked about, and innovative diversity, teaching the next generation with historical responsibility. So the nice thing about this, and what's kind of different in history-wise, is your primary source is an actual massive object. You can get your hands on, you can touch, you can feel, you can hear everything, which is quite impressive because some of the other stuff I dealt with was pieces of paper looking back at me, and that's not as fun as getting in a car and driving around. So, the preservation of artifacts and surviving automobiles from the Stanley Motor Carriage Company is far more than an exercise in nostalgia, because it's essential for an active historical stewardship. So, age-old talk, restoration versus preservation. What is the best practice? What is the intended use of the vehicle? I'll start there. So, the best practice relates on where you're wanting to go with it. If you're wanting the car to sit in a museum, you can just leave it as it is, usually, and keep it there. If you're wanting to drive it on the road, you're not going to take a decrepit old piece of junk out on the road and put everyone in danger, especially yourself. Then do we wish to keep as much originality for historical sake? That goes back to the top one. If you're wanting to drive it, you can't go on an old frame. You got to restore the car. So then we need to do conservation ethics. Preserve where possible, restore when needed. As I said, I work in a restoration shop where we focus on these cars. One of the biggest things we have to do when the car comes in, take photographs of every single component. Whether or not you're touching it, you need to photograph it. So that's where, say the customer just wants one paint job. Okay, well, you want to leave the bottom part of the car original, maybe just touch the top part. You kind of go wherever you need to. So, roles in museums, archivists, and collectors. Modern preservation efforts, some museums, private collectors, clubs, they kind of tailor the car for what their needs are. A lot of museums now are kind of revitalizing their cars that they put in there in the 50s and 60s, so you kind of have to go through a lot of work to make sure it's safe and take it on the road. Private collectors, believe it or not, from coast to coast, there's these cars all around, almost, I think, at least 2 or 3 in every single state. Clubs, there's steam clubs all around, and these people are very active with their cars, they love them, they're very strange, but they're fun people to be around, fun cars to be around. So, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is a lack of representation with steam. Like I said, when I first went out there, I knew nothing about these cars and never even saw one. So most of the shows or concours I go to, people look at this thing and will not believe that it's run on steam because they're so used to gas. So when you need to go out there and show this to the public, and operatable cars offer many insights because you can take it out on the streets and enjoy it. So for historians, the value of preserving Stanley artifacts lies in the ability to showcase American entrepreneurship, mechanical advancements, and future generations access to the world of our past. A functioning Stanley demonstrates in ways a textbook or archived photo couldn't fully convey the alternative power of steam that was offered early movers. So broader historical impact, cultural and society insights. My biggest thing was, besides the cars, going through, and a lot of early drivers kept logs, like their day-to-day of whether they had a 10-mile trip or a 100-mile trip. That was probably the most fun thing I did throughout this whole process, was rating all of them. So getting to see how they drove their car and enjoyed it, whether they pulled up to a horse trough and stole water from it or from the fish. So, common power source turned mobile, like I said, there was a steam engine, put it on wheels. So what I used for my primary sources was actual cars that I've worked on, that we have some original ones, manuals of the car, factory photos and letters. Like I said, a lot of people loved their cars back in the day. There's an attachment of them. And so countless things I found, just people writing about this car and how they enjoyed it. So once again, my biggest thing was it's not just about the Stanley steam cars. We're showing forgotten technological path. In conclusion, the Stanley Motor Carriage Company represents innovation, creativity, and alternative progress. The benefits of preserving this company is teaching tools for engineering and human stories and lots of primary sources. Historian responsibility, like I said, conservation ethics, that's a huge one what we're doing with. Gas dominance was not inevitable. Here's my sources.
So comparing Stanley to other steam car like makers, what made them better than like other like White or somebody else?
I would say so Stanley's big thing is they kind of are like a tea kettle or like a hot water heater in your house, where other companies, White, Gardner Serpollet, Doble, they use a steam generator, where Stanley's were pretty easy to work with. You know, you can go out there, your driver can understand it, where those other cars, they were a lot more advanced and cost a lot more. So that's why Stanley was the most popular steam car in the United States.
Could we go back to making steam cars? I'm thinking, is it possible to build a steam car that like would start when you just turned on the key and had all of the features of cars now? So, I mean, it would seem to make such a huge difference in terms of global climate change. So, could we go back to it?
So I feel like I'm asked that question anytime I have one of these steam cars out. There is a possibility, in my personal belief, that yes, if they could enhance steam generators way back in the day, I feel like in today's technology, we could do them again. You know, is it worth putting all the money into? I say why not? Now we have gas cars, we have electric cars. Why can't we have steam cars? You know, it's maybe worth a shot. So that's what I believe. Any others?
Thanks so much, Cash. That was great. So we have David. Oh, that's okay. No, don't worry. I just was really.
My name's Breanna, I'm doing the Boxer Bill. My question was, how did the Boxer Rebellion affect missionary work? And my claim is that even though the Boxer Rebellion failed to expel missionary work from China, missionary work would change as a reaction to the Boxer Rebellion, and it went from going from an aggressive conversion strategy to a passive conversion strategy. There were 8 countries involved: Britain, America, France, Germany, Russia, Japan, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. Though I'm only focusing on these countries and not Italy and Austria, because in the grand scheme of things, they're not that important. And so this is kind of how, because during the scramble for China, they try to get spheres of influence in China. They didn't try to colonially possess it, except Japan and Russia. And basically they only wanted to control trade and the natural resources and be able to build railroads and telephone lines. The Opium War is a very important part of this because it was the first time that foreign countries were kind of interacting with China, and it was the Opium War was a trade war between China and Britain, and it basically Britain wanted more trading power because they liked Chinese tea, spices, and silk, but China didn't really want anything from Britain, and so Britain's solution to this problem was smuggling a bunch of addictive substances into China. And Chinese people quickly became addicted to it, and it destroyed Chinese currency. And obviously addiction increased, and people stopped working because they were just so addicted to it, and then they were spending all their money. And the emperor, seeing the effects that opium was having on his people, he banned it, but Britain kept smuggling it in. And when they were caught, the Chinese government burned all of it. Britain got mad and decided to start a war, and they won. And during the Treaty of Nanking, it gave Britain control of five trade port cities in the island of Hong Kong. And they also demanded that any future privileges that they would give to any other nation, they would also receive. And this war would leave China just completely weakened, and it allowed the other countries to politically invade. Missionary work. Missionaries would offer food, charity, and orphanages to their followers. They also offered protection and power to the converts, and missionaries looked down on the Chinese culture and wanted to replace Confucian teachings with Christian teachings. And they would also encourage the converts to not participate in traditional Chinese rituals and festivals. And this would just kind of tear apart the social fabric of town and village life. And the conflicts that Europeans had with the Chinese. So the Chinese kind of viewed Jesus' crucifixion, or the image of it, they kind of viewed it as evil, because the disheveled hair and the body was kind of viewed to them as evil. And disheveled hair was a common trope for like an evil ogre. And then Christ as a rebel, his execution is viewed as a execution of a political criminal, and rarely does the Chinese sentiment allow a convicted criminal to be completely guilt-free like the missionaries claimed. And they also questioned, if Christ can't save himself, how is he supposed to save me? And then another problem is just the size of China, like geographically, it's just so big that missionaries would complain. It's like, every time we go to a new village, they've never heard of Jesus, so we're just starting over again. And then also trying to convert 400 to 450 million people is not fun. And then the Chinese reactions to Western religion was, they were kind of confused, because especially like the higher ups were like, why are you here? And then it's like, we're not going to convert to Christianity, we're not going to throw out the teachings of Confucius, so again, why are you here? To just outright hostility, where they would force Chinese converts to like trample a cross or a crucifix placed on the ground, and they would burn books and destroy churches. And there were many attacks on Catholics. One was the French Catholic Sisters of Charity, in which a bunch of nuns who ran an orphanage. There were rumors that claimed that they were cutting out children's hearts and eyes and making medicine. And when several children in the orphanage died of illness, a frenzied mob broke in and raped and murdered 16 nuns, and they threw their bodies in the flames of the mission that they destroyed. The Boxers, they're originally called the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, but foreigners called them Boxers because the way they fought is very reminiscent of like Chinese boxing. And they're an anti-foreign movement that were made up of mostly peasants. And they fought with swords, spears, and sometimes guns. And they claimed to have supernatural abilities that made them immune to bullets, swords, and spears. And their targets were foreigners, Chinese Christians, and anyone who was remotely friendly with a foreigner. The Boxer attacks, and the first Boxer attack was Sidney Brooks. The murder happened in 1899, and this murder, the diplomats did not take it seriously at first, because again, the attacks were not an everyday occurrence, but they were so regular that they didn't think anything of it. And even before the murder, missionaries were like begging the diplomats to like send troops because they were like, it's getting aggressive. We're like kind of scared for our safety. And the diplomats basically told them to get over it. And before they kind of did the siege of Peking, they would also attack like foreigners and Christians. They would go to churches, homes. If they found them on the streets, they would just kill them. And then the biggest probably attack was the siege of Peking, which it lasted 55 days and it occurred between June 20th to August 14th, 1900. And they attacked foreign diplomats, soldiers, and civilians, and 60 foreigners and hundreds of Chinese Christians died. And kind of at the beginning of the siege, Clemens von Kelter would die, and he was a German minister. And he actually went to go talk to the Chinese government body that was in charge of like foreign policy in China, because they all told the foreigners, they were like, you need to leave. You have 24 hours to leave. And he kind of went to talk to him about it. And as he was going to go discuss it, as he was on his way over there, he was shot and killed. And the newspapers that went to the foreigners conveniently didn't mention the fact that days prior, he had a Chinese man executed because he suspected that he was a boxer. And his death would cause the 8 nations to take this seriously because this was kind of seen as an act of war. So the foreign attacks, the 2 biggest ones was the Seymour expedition. It was led by the British Admiral Edward Seymour, and he led 2,000 men from the 8 nations. But as he was on his way there, he had to retreat because the Boxers and the Chinese soldiers destroyed the railways on both sides, so behind and in front of them. And during this retreat, they had to leave behind their trains, heavy equipment, and the bulk of their ammunition. And then during the relief of Peking, on August 14th, the 8 nations would be able to breach the city walls. And they used between 19,000 to 20,000 troops to end the siege, and roughly 900 foreigners and Chinese Christians were saved. The Boxer Protocol, this was done like a treaty, and China was forced to pay around $333 million to the nations. It exceeded the government's annual revenue and crippled its finances. China was forbidden from importing weapons for 2 years, and the forts were dismantled, and foreign troops were permanently stationed in Peking to protect the foreign legions. And the Chinese government was ordered to execute any member of the Boxers and any government official that supported or helped them in any way. And the Chinese government was forbidden from any anti-foreign activity under the threat of death. In the aftermath, the Qing dynasty was the Boxer Protocol left it severely weakened, and it humiliated them, and it would end in 1912. And Christianity in China would experience a rapid increase from 1900 to 1925, and in the 1940s, the Chinese Communist Party would ban foreign missionaries, and afterwards the church became fully indigenous and increasingly underground. And afterwards, missionary work became way more passive and less aggressive. They relied more on native converts instead of foreign converts, because native converts, of course, Chinese people, they lived in China. They know how to explain Christianity in a way that other Chinese people would be more open to. And Christianity and the church kind of became more willing to mold itself into whatever culture that it was trying to get into, instead of completely trying to throw out a country's way of thinking and believing. And these are my resources.
Do you want to take any questions, Breanna?
Sure.
In the aggressive missionary period, I'd be curious if you know what Confucian teachings the missionaries felt the most threatening to Christian teachings. because when I think about a Confucian worldview and a Christian worldview, that it seems like the two could very easily fit together. It doesn't seem like there are key elements of Confucianism that would rule out Christian tenets and principle. And so I'm wondering what particular idea of, say, maybe Confucius or the Neo-Confucians that they found so threatening.
I couldn't really find anything about that because it was like just the sources that I found. It was just the missionaries kind of complaining about like the Chinese just not accepting like Jesus because it was just like everything about him was just kind of offensive to them.
Well, some of the sources you discussed, clearly they didn't understand Confucian. Like that, they didn't have any idea what it was.
No, because it was just like a bunch of foreigners coming in and being like, oh, follow Jesus, and they don't explain it very well, which is why they had to rely on them. And like also during the early days, they kind of realized and they were a little annoyed about like the Chinese converts being able to explain it better than them.
Did the British sneak in opium intending for Chinese civilians to get addicted to it?
Yes. That was always the goal, because there were British people complaining about it, including Karl Marx for some reason.
Was there only Catholic missionaries, or were there also Protestant missionaries?
There was also Protestant missionaries, but I kind of threw them all under the same umbrella.
What was it? Was there any differences between the two and how they would have more success or anything like that?
No, they kind of did similar things.
Okay. Thanks, Breanna.
Should I just log into my?
Yeah, if you want to do that sort of privately, I can turn this screen off. Ready? There it goes.
So I did my thesis on sort of UK football subculture, how changing sport can affect subculture and exploration of the UK's casual and ultra movements. Just kind of for a bit of background moving forward, looking at like what do I mean by subculture, because that's kind of a nebulous definition. In this case, I kind of looked at culture as this idea of a shared system of symbols and meanings commonly understood by different groups, very like broad and abstract definition. But in this case, that means that the same sport, football, is understood differently between the mainstream, kind of like the typical sport enjoyer, just the average person who even isn't interested in sports, versus these two distinct groups of populations who have associated meanings with different things, casuals and ultras. And kind of look at how this can affect behavior. Then, for why I decided to focus on this topic, I think it offers some important insights into UK sports subculture from 1970 to present. It looks at class, economics, fashion, and culture, and how all these different things blend together, kind of like a big interdisciplinary thing. And it shows a direct link between the economics of entertainment and behavior of actual individuals and groups. So first, kind of defining these two groups, because, you know, like in America, these are pretty unfamiliar terms. First, casuals. This group has working class origins in sort of urban UK cities, typically more north of like London, like the most familiar city. So these are areas like Liverpool, Merseyside, and Manchester that have strongly industrial or port town backgrounds. This group, the casuals, they're strongly connected to football hooliganism and violence and were heavily policed during their time. So, you know, you're looking at groups of people who would organize themselves in firms of up to 50, kind of like a loose organization with a loose leadership structure, and travel to continental away games, whether that's for like the English national football team or their individual football clubs like Manchester United, Liverpool football club. And they would engage in these like structured sort of rituals of violence is basically the best way I could put it. Engaging with fans of other football clubs, engaging in brawling, but all under kind of like the same social understanding. Then moving on to casuals fashion, which will kind of become important later. Because these groups of people, these firms were traveling overseas and traveling to continental European countries, they started adopting sportswear brands that weren't available in the UK. So those are brands like Adidas, Lacoste, and Fila, which might be household names now. But at the time, in the 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, weren't widely available to like your average UK citizen. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this is, first of all, kind of by wearing these brands, saying you're part of this subculture, you're showing that like the exclusivity and the belonging is coming from you going overseas, right? You participating in this culture, you doing these activities. Also, another thing that's interesting is anonymity from the police profiling was kind of emphasized. Prior to the casual culture, football hooliganism, sort of these violent events, was still very much around, but it had begun to be profiled. So like your typical football hooligan would be like your classic skinhead or something along those lines, like big boots, very easy to pick out. You'd be wearing your team colors. The casuals stepped away from wearing their team's colors. So like if your team's main color is blue, you wear like a gray track top, right? And this is all to kind of avoid policing, to kind of continue these violent rituals. Here's kind of like a source, first person source image of the time. You can see the gentleman on the left, kind of like a very typical casual look. It's like a sports European track jacket, jeans. If you look in the stands, you can see like they're acting very rowdy hooliganism, right? And you can see Adidas sneakers here, which were not available in the UK at the time, showing these gentlemen. This is taken at a UK game, but they had gone overseas prior. And you can see police officer obviously pretty worried about what's going on. Then moving on to the ultras. So the casual period was kind of 1970 through the 1990s. Ultras, they originated in Italy in the 1960s. They're much more rooted in European football culture, which is kind of distinct from the UK. But over the past 2 decades or so, it's begun to be adopted by UK citizens, UK football supporters. There's less focus on actual violence and brawling, though that, a lot of podcast interviews will say that energy was transferred elsewhere. So there's more of a focus on participation in the stands through chants, choreography, pyrotechnics. You hear songs, Another difference between casuals and ultras is there is no like official organization of these groups at all. They kind of just show up to the game, they have a shared culture, but the social connection isn't as strong. So here's some pictures of kind of typical ultra behavior. This is from a group named after the section of the stands where they participate called the Green Brigade. First of all, that's what I mean by pyrotechnics. Like they all bring flare guns, and when they get to the game, they organize themselves in rows. So that way, it's like we have white flares. We'll sit here. This is a club in Scotland that's very connected to Irish culture. It's very connected to political culture. You can see here there's like a Palestinian demonstration happening because this club is very much connected to like Irish independence and like very strongly political movements. Whereas the casual movement had no political associations. It was purely an apolitical celebration of the sport, in their minds. As for ultra fashion, it's still based around European brands. The biggest one is by far a brand called Stone Island, that's from Italy. And it's generally, rather than just sportswear, centered around technical outdoors sort of branding. There's a drastic difference in price because of that. So instead of track tops, we're talking about things that you're supposed to hike Mount Everest in, things that have thousands and thousands of dollars in R&D put into them. And another difference is it's grown a lot more mainstream than casual fashion ever was. Rappers like Drake will wear Stone Island as a reference to ultra culture. And like a lot of fashion house brands have picked up on this trend in particular and used it as inspiration for their lines. Again, typical sort of picture of ultras at a game. This is the Stone Island logo. It's like a very important motif of ultra culture. This idea of like getting the badge in, because Stone Island puts this badge on the sleeve of most of their top garments. And you can see a lot less rowdy than the casuals were. So just kind of looking at the price comparison, here is a 1980 catalog of Adidas clothing in Germany. If you take those, take them from Deutschmarks, convert them to like modern USD, those shoes would run you a real cost of $69 to $75 between those two models. Pretty reasonable for a sneaker. You know, again, you can see similar models being worn, period accurate. Compare that to a popular footwear item for ultras today. This is the used prices. They were originally released for $140, but they sold out immediately due to scalpers. So the majority of modern day fans who want this pretty iconic, pretty important sneaker would be paying, you know, $688, $588. This is from StockX, which is kind of like the most popular reselling site. And just another thing to kind of compare, your casuals in the 80s, 70s, they were wearing a real cost track jacket that might cost $90 at the upper end. The ultras are wearing jackets that could cost, and this is the best sourcing I can find on this, up to $1,150. So like a vastly more expensive item, despite these two cultures having a lot of shared roots and a lot of shared activities. So why is there such a drastic change? Well, first of all, I think the inaffordability of affording matches nowadays. To go get season tickets today would be 10 times more expensive than it would have in the 1980s. And they would cost 1/3 of the average middle-class person's disposable income. So that's much, much more involvement in going to these games, even just for your home team. Also, nowadays football has a much more global audience and a lot more global attention. So if you want to get tickets to your home game, you might be competing with people flying in from Canada. You might be competing with celebrities. You might be competing with people who are, even with broadcasting rights, hiking up the demand by getting interested in the sport as it's continued to grow over the decades. So my conclusion, kind of why did I look at these two groups? As UK football is increasingly commercialized, the subcultures built around it have changed. Older support demographics have been priced out due to these rising costs and due to the increased intention, which means that people who have more means are coming into the sport just by necessity. This means that the exclusivity of these subcultures is no longer based on participation. It's no longer based around going to Germany with your friends. It's no longer based around like sort of participation in an active sense. And it's more about price and kind of commodification. So yeah.
And would you have any questions for Canon?
Do you, I know this is outside of your scheme of your study, but do you see a reflection in American sports?
That's kind of one of the reasons I was interested in this, is I wonder if this model will be replicated. Like, for example, something that's been popular at a grassroots level for a long time in the US is college football, but you could say it's having like a moment, like SEC and like the technicalities of conferences are like kind of becoming more widespread, known, mainstream. So, you know, and ticket prices are going up despite them having been so low for forever. So, you know, I wonder if, even though we don't have like named subcultures around college football in the US, if we'll see a similar trend where, you know, more upper bracket people on the economic scale are going to be going. You know, I wonder if this model will be replicated, but I haven't seen that in the US up till now. Unless you count like the NFL being founded in the 1960s and before, you can maybe look at that period.
So, I feel like naming a subculture is, at least in my like a more recent phenomenon. Do the casuals refer to themselves as the casuals, or is that something that we kind of impose on them now?
Casuals was organic of the time. Ultras was not. Ultras is because it's been around since the 1960s and it was mostly in Europe, they had, you know, European language names for the different nations. Ultras started when the UK started adopting them in the 2010s. So, you know, half and half there. But yeah, casuals, that was pretty immediate because they kind of grew out of skinhead culture, like the non-racist skinhead culture of the 1960s, 1970s. And it was kind of showing like, you know, they're wearing sneakers instead of like Doc Martens. They're wearing track jackets instead of jean jackets, et cetera, et cetera. That's where that came from. All right.
Thanks again, Canon. So as you saw, we had a wide variety of topics this year, but I'm really excited with all the hard work that all of our graduates have done, or to-be graduates, and I'm really excited about all the adventures that you'll get up to in your future. So thanks so much for everyone for coming.